Well, good evening, this is Hound Dog Steve, wishing you a very pleasant evening, and I hope this finds you well. So this is a follow-up from last night's video about the Brexit negotiated deal, and the vote failed, 322 to 306. And also at the same time, what's called the Letwin amendment was passed, and that means that Boris Johnson now has to ask for an extension into January of 2020, and that extension will stand even if MPs vote to pass the deal that was negotiated just recently. Now, Boris Johnson has said that he will not negotiate a delay. And that is actually a very cleverly worded statement, because he was never asked to negotiate by law. The law demanded that he ask for an extension. Okay, well, asking and negotiating are two different things, but the EU has said that they will not give an extension, and so, you know, a meaningful vote hasn't been taken. It's going to be really difficult to get this back on track again before October the 31st, and so we're just going to have to wait and see how it all unfolds in the next 2 weeks. I'll show you in an article the final voting tally, and it's fascinating that the vast majority, I believe all but 6 Labour MPs, have voted against this deal, and of course you have to remember that 60% of the ridings that Labour took in the last election are ridings that voted to leave the EU. So Labour could find themselves brutally punished in the next election for their stalling and blocking tactics, but the DUP weren't on side, and so they lost all that support, and some of the rebels from within the Conservative Party also voted against the deal. So we will have to see. There was going to be a meaningful vote on Monday, but as you'll see from the clip that I will show you, that Boris Johnson has said that's no point in that, because basically because they pulled the rug out from under his feet, and so, as I say, we just have to sit and wait and see what happens, and indeed whether the EU will accept an extension. You know, the EU have flip-flopped backwards and forwards on many things, so you don't always get what you see when the EU is talking. Anyway, let's just flip over and take a little look at these articles, and I'll come back and do a quick wrap-up. Okie dokie, here we go. From the Daily Mirror. Brexit. Boris Johnson loses showdown vote, meaning he must ask for delay by law. The humiliating result on the Oliver Letwin amendment means the Prime Minister still has no closure on Brexit, yet he flatly refused to negotiate a delay, leaving the next steps up in the air. Okay, so Boris Johnson is legally obliged to ask for a Brexit delay by 11 PM tonight, after he lost a historic vote in the House of Commons. The humiliated PM faces breaking his do-or-die pledge to leave on October 31st after MPs voted 322 to 306, a majority of 16, for the crucial amendment. The result effectively means he must, by law, ask the EU for a 3-month extension tonight, even if MPs end up backing his Brexit deal in the coming weeks. But while not explicitly saying he'd break the law, the defiant PM today suggested he would be as difficult as possible and refuse to negotiate any delay with the EU. It came as Parliament sat on a Saturday for the first time in 37 years, whilst thousands of protesters stood outside demanding a second referendum. And I can assure you that there will be no second referendum if they'd voted to stay in the EU. I do wish these crybabies and Ramonas would just accept the fact they'd lost the vote. Boris Johnson wanted to force MPs into a meaningful vote on his Brexit deal that would have locked in a legal countdown to October 31st, but his plans for a moment in history were scuppered by ousted Tory Sir Oliver Letwin.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very grateful to you. I'm very grateful to the House of Commons staff, everybody who's put themselves out, everybody who's come to give up their time in this debate today. It's been a very important debate, an exceptional moment for our country, an exceptional moment for our Parliament. Alas, the opportunity to have a meaningful vote has effectively been passed up because the meaningful vote has been voided of meaning. But I wish the House to know that I'm not daunted or dismayed by this particular result, and I think it probably became likely once it was obvious that the amendment from my right honourable friend, the member for West Dorset, was going to remain on the order paper. I continue in the very strong belief that the best thing for the UK and for the whole of Europe is for us to leave with this new deal on October the 31st. And to anticipate the questions that are coming from the benches opposite, I will not negotiate a delay with the EU. And neither does the law compel me to do so. I will tell our friends and colleagues in the EU exactly what I have told everyone in the last 88 days that I've served as Prime Minister, that further delay would be bad for this country, bad for our European Union, and bad for democracy.
And the only thing I would add here, and I had someone comment about this, and I completely agree, that if the EU is happy with this deal, it will mean that it is not as good a deal as you might think it is, because the EU will extract every last drop that they can. They will make the least amount of concessions, and they will force the most detriment they can on your side of the deal. So it'll be interesting to see how this works out, whether that deal will have to be accepted on the 31st of October if there's no agreement. We'll just have to wait and see. All bets are off right now, and none of us will know until we pass through this next 2 weeks. And here he is, Jeremy Corbyn, the master of disruption. But Jeremy Corbyn, who backed the delay amendment, said, "I totally understand the frustration and the fatigue across the country and in this House, but we simply cannot vote for a deal that is even worse than the one the House rejected 3 times. Mr. Corbyn is as slippery as an eel. You really just can't trust anything that he says, and he's nothing but trouble." Okay, so this is how the MPs voted on the Letwin amendment. For nearly all Labour MPs, 231, the DUP, SNP, Lib Dems, Greens, Plaid Cymru, Independent Group, and 17 independents, including 10 ousted Tories. And against nearly all Conservative MPs, 283, 6 Labour MPs and 17 independents, including 11 ousted Tories. So, as I said, I think Labour is running a real risk, as I said, all but 6 Labour MPs voted on the Letwin amendment, and they will have to face their constituents. And yes, you're darn right, there's fatigue out there, and I think the payback is going to come in the next election. And this from The Guardian: France would have left the EU in a similar referendum to UK, says Macron. The French people would probably vote to leave the EU if presented with a similar choice to the Brexit referendum, Emmanuel Macron has said, arguing that the UK had taken a big risk by asking a yes or no on a very complicated subject. So, as I said, there'll be no French referendum anytime soon. I really do find it interesting. You see this written all the time in the newspapers, and the commentary about Brexit from the people who want to remain, or the Ramonas as they're called, is, they're always attacking Boris Johnson about his undemocratic way, his illegal way of behaving, his unlawful way of behaving, and we keep forgetting that we had a legal and lawful referendum, which the Brexiteers won, and that is not being respected. That is the foundational problem, and that is continually brushed away by the media and by the Labour politicians, by Jeremy Corbyn. It's as if they've completely forgotten. And I'm sure they have completely forgotten, because you know what, these people are no respecters of the public will, and now we're seeing how clearly this is so in your face. And we're seeing it worldwide, and that's why you're seeing all of these revolts, revolutions, Hong Kong, the Yellow Vest protests, Brexit, there's the Yellow Vest protests going on in Canada now. So I think that people really are starting to wake up to what this is going to look like if it continues on too much further down the track. And it isn't going to be very pretty, my friends, because, as they say, globalism does not care about you or me or your political affiliations. It is about a massive power grab where you will be absolutely powerless, and there will be only two classes of people. It'll be neo-feudalism. This will be going back pre-Magna Carta, and the wall of bureaucracy will protect the elite. And of course the elite will be there to maintain their control over that bureaucracy. So in future, be very careful how you vote. Be very careful when you listen to the words of the elite. They talk a very, very, very good story. They're very presentable and very believable. But I'm asking you to look at their actions. Look at how they behave when the chips are down. And it's interesting, I was just reading an interview with Macron, and this is back in 2018, but he said that were they to have a referendum in France, a Frexit vote, he feels that the French population would vote for Frexit. They would vote to leave the EU. And of course Macron is very pro-EU, so there's absolutely no doubt there will be no referendum in France until after the next presidential elections, and we'll have to see what happens then. But yes, watch how these people behave and be very careful before you ink that deal, before you cast that ballot, because how we behave politically in this climate, in this particular time, is really, really important. It can make the world a difference. Okay, so if you've enjoyed this video, please comment, like and subscribe below. And in the meantime, this is Hound Dog Steve signing off, wishing you a very pleasant evening, and we will talk very, very shortly. You take care now. See ya. Bye.